My husband treated a quiet life as failure and pushed exclusion at public events. A hidden legacy made silence easy until private bank details surfaced. Calls turned urgent, concern turned forceful, and the moment control was challenged, consequences began unfolding fast. Before the full story unfolds, support this channel by subscribing and leaving a comment about where the story is being watched from, so it reaches people who need to hear it. My name is Lena Whitmore. I am 29 years old, married for 3 years and living in a high-rise condo at Harborline Residences in Bayshore Heights. From the outside, the life looks simple and slightly mismatched. A modest wardrobe, an older car, no visible luxury. People assume the comfort comes from my husband, Kayla Whitmore, because that is the story he allows to exist. Silence made that assumption easy. The marriage didn't begin with disrespect. It began with charm and structure. Caleb knew how to command attention without raising his voice. Meetings bent around his confidence. Rooms followed his energy. Early on, that presence felt reassuring. Over time, that same presence began deciding things without discussion. Caleb's mother, Marjorie Whitmore, reinforced those decisions quietly. No insults, no arguments, just subtle positioning, seating arrangements at dinners, tasks assigned that kept me moving instead of speaking, compliments that framed usefulness instead of value, being called easy and low maintenance as if those traits defined worth. Publicly, the role was clear. Quiet wife, background support, no need for opinions in rooms where important conversations happened. That role was never accidental. The legacy that made silence possible came from my mother, Rosemary Hale. No dramatic inheritance, no sudden fortune, just decades of disciplined investment in logistics, infrastructure, and shipping operations that rarely make headlines. Ownership transferred through a trust when illness took her quickly. No announcements followed. No lifestyle changed. The trust matured into a legacy valued at just under $56 million, managed quietly and deliberately. That money was never hidden out of fear. It stayed private out of intention. I wanted to understand something before deciding what to do next. Who stays when nothing appears to be available? The answer began forming long before the gala. Exclusion grew gradually. Invitations shifted into obligations. Dinners turned into performances. At public events, my seat moved farther away from Caleb's side each time. Better optics. Cleaner presentation. Less distraction. The explanations were delivered smoothly and expected to be accepted. The Skyline Veranda Lounge Gala made the hierarchy obvious. Black tie, donors, press. Caleb's name appeared prominently on programs and signage. Marjorie floated from table to table, like ownership followed her. The financial backbone of the event ran quietly through accounts connected to my trust. Routed through vendors and concierge services, no one bothered to question. The morning of the gala, an email arrived from Summit Ridge Financial. A secondary authorization attempt had been flagged and denied. Someone tried to access discretionary controls that required approval. The system requested confirmation. No confirmation was given. The message went straight to Elliot Monroe, legal counsel retained years before marriage. The response came back short and precise. Observation recommended. At the venue, Marjorie intercepted me before the main hall. A hand placed gently at my elbow. A practice smile. A suggestion delivered as instruction. Circulation works better tonight. Caleb didn't object. Agreement showed itself through silence. Acceptance came easily. From the edges of the room, patterns became obvious. Tablets stopped approving open tabs. A coordinator excused herself repeatedly. Staff whispered. At exactly 9:30, expressions shifted. Phones buzzed. A donor hospitality charge failed to clear. Departure happened without announcement. By the time I reached home, messages stacked quickly. Confusion. Questions. Requests framed as concerns. Suggestions framed as solutions. Silence answered everything. Another email arrived before midnight. Ramirez Asset Integrity Group confirmed initiation of a compliance review following irregular access behavior. Automated. Neutral. Thorough. Caleb came home after midnight. No shouting. No accusations. Pacing replaced certainty. Questions circled instead of landing. Fixes were suggested. Responsibility avoided. Then a request surfaced carefully. Can this be fixed? A question returned instead. Why wasn't my place beside you tonight? No answer followed. Morning brought a call from Marjorie. Concern layered over control. A request to meet and clear confusion. Declined politely. The following days rewrote every dynamic. Vendors requested prepayment. Invitations slowed. A charity board postponed announcements. A concierge service asked for updated authorization. Each refusal triggered another checkpoint. Systems adjust faster than people. Mediation was requested formally. Neutral location. Witnesses present. Language framed around misunderstandings. Attendance was accepted. Inside Keegan Resolution Suites, documentation replaced narrative. Trust structures. Access logs. Authorization attempts. Expense trails. No accusations. No emotion required. Understanding arrived without resistance. The quiet wife had been underwriting relevance. Influence existed only while access remained open. Control disappeared the moment silence ended. Terms were simple. Financial separation. Revoked access. No public representation. No statements. A signature followed. Afterward, the fallout stayed quiet. No public implosion. No confrontation. Just absence. Boards reorganized. Influence drifted elsewhere. Attention moved on. At Harborline residences, space returned. Mornings felt unclaimed. Decisions felt owned. Silence remained, but now it belonged to me. This was only the beginning. The separation didn't explode. It thinned out, like fog lifting slowly enough that no one could point to the exact moment visibility returned. Days passed without confrontation, which only made the shift more unsettling. Absence replaced noise. Structure replaced chaos. Caleb stayed elsewhere after the mediation. No announcement. No explanation. Personal belongings were removed in stages. First suits, then shoes, then framed photos that had never included me anyway. The condo settled into stillness, not loneliness. Neutral space reclaimed from performance. Financial systems completed their transitions quietly. Elliot Monroe confirmed all discretionary pathways had been sealed. No shared visibility. No secondary notifications. No emergency access points left open. The trust functioned exactly as designed, autonomous, contained, patient. Marjorie didn't accept the shift immediately. The approach changed form. No direct calls. No direct messages. Influence traveled through intermediaries. A concierge asked whether preferences had changed. A charity coordinator requested clarification on donor authority. A venue manager inquired about seating adjustments for an upcoming event. Each question received the same response. Independent authorization required. No exceptions. The result wasn't confrontation. It was confusion. Systems don't argue. Systems either allow or deny. Social dynamics shifted next. Invitations that once arrived automatically now arrived with qualifiers. If available. If convenient. If schedules align. Influence had always depended on certainty. Once certainty dissolved, enthusiasm followed. Caleb attempted contact, once, late evening. A single message asking for conversation without formalities. The message stayed unopened. Boundaries had already been communicated clearly. Life simplified. Morning routines belonged to me again. No commentary on choices. No feedback disguised as advice. Decisions moved at my pace. Silence no longer waited for permission. Work began quietly. Meetings with Oliver Grant refined long-term deployment strategies. Not growth for growth's sake, but stability, insulation, longevity. Funds shifted into diversified holdings designed to operate independently of any single institution or advisor. Redundancy replaced exposure. A different project took shape alongside the restructuring. A discrete initiative focused on exit planning for women, navigating, financially, controlling relationships. No branding. No public campaign. Just infrastructure, legal resources, financial literacy access, temporary advisory coverage. Quiet help, deliberately invisible. That work mattered more than anything else unfolding. The first pushback arrived indirectly. A board invitation addressed jointly, assuming reconciliation. The invitation was declined individually. The response required no explanation. No follow-up arrived. Caleb's name surfaced later through professional channels. A role adjustment, a partnership restructured. No announcement framed it as failure. But absence speaks clearly in rooms built on visibility. Marjorie made one last attempt to re-enter through narrative. A carefully worded email framed concern around emotional strain, stress, and isolation. The message avoided accusation while implying fragility. Elliot responded formally. Any further suggestion of oversight would be documented as harassment. The email stopped. Time revealed patterns more honestly than confrontation ever could. Relationships that depended on access dissolved quickly. Relationships that never asked for anything remained steady. Nina Carter stayed. Weekly walks along the marina resumed without agenda. No questions asked. No assumptions made. Company offered, not required. A neighbor named Paula Jensen started leaving fresh bread outside the door on Sundays. No explanation attached. Just warmth extended without expectation. The condo transformed slowly. Furniture rearranged. Neutral colors replaced curated statements. Space stopped signaling status and started reflecting ownership. Legal finalization followed without resistance. No contested assets. No prolonged negotiation. Just signatures and confirmation. Distance formalized through process, not drama. The aftermath didn't feel like victory. It felt like alignment. Systems functioning as intended. Boundaries holding without reinforcement. A final message arrived weeks later from Caleb. Short. Acknowledgement without apology. A statement about misunderstanding. A request to reset. The message stayed unanswered. Closure didn't require dialogue anymore. Patterns had already concluded the conversation. Attention returned to the work ahead. Advisory meetings shifted from defense to design. Philanthropic strategy focused on durability rather than optics. Support structures expanded quietly into 3 additional regions. Freedom didn't announce itself. Freedom settled in. The quiet wife no longer existed. Not replaced by spectacle. Replaced by certainty. This was still unfolding. The first formal escalation arrived 6 weeks after the separation papers were finalized. Not through personal contact. Not through lawyers directly, but through an institutional channel designed to look neutral. A compliance notice appeared from a private family services firm requesting verification of decision-making continuity following a significant marital transition. The wording was careful. The implication was not. The timing was not accidental. The firm had prior connections to Marjorie. Board overlap. Shared donors. Indirect familiarity that allowed assumptions to travel faster than facts. The request did not accuse. It suggested review. Review suggested vulnerability. Vulnerability created opportunity. The notice was forwarded immediately to Elliot Monroe. Response followed within hours. Documentation attached. Independent evaluations already completed. Legal authority, clearly established. Any further inquiry would require cause, not curiosity. The firm withdrew the request without comment. That didn't end the pressure. It refined it. Social channels activated next. Invitations returned but altered. Smaller gatherings, private dinners, safe spaces, places where narrative could be shaped without records. Each invitation declined without explanation. Patterns don't require justification once boundaries are visible. A fundraiser in Coral Bay became the next test. A last-minute seat reassignment placed me at a peripheral table. No confrontation occurred. Attendance proceeded. Contribution remained unchanged. The following morning, confirmation arrived that future seating would follow original donor agreements. Correction happened quietly. Caleb's attempts to regain footing grew less subtle. A mutual acquaintance reached out with concern about distance and miscommunication. The message asked whether a private meeting might restore balance. The question was not answered. A week later, a professional introduction arrived unexpectedly. An advisor proposing collaborative oversight for reassurance. The advisor's background traced cleanly back to Marjorie's circle. The proposal was declined. Contact ceased. Every attempt followed the same arc: entry through concern, persistence through politeness, exit through refusal. What followed next crossed a different line. A sealed envelope arrived at Harborline Residences, marked confidential. Inside was a notice of intent to petition for temporary financial guardianship review, citing recent behavioral changes, withdrawal from long-standing social structures, and potential isolation following marital dissolution. The language mimicked care. The implication challenged autonomy. The move was aggressive enough to require immediate response. Elliot arrived in person that afternoon. The document wasn't filed yet. It was leverage, a warning shot designed to provoke engagement, to pull conversation back into private space where pressure could be applied. The response was immediate and decisive. A formal letter returned outlining documented financial independence, third-party oversight, medical evaluations, and a clear notice that any attempt to proceed would trigger counteraction for harassment and reputational interference. The envelope never became a filing. Silence followed. The next months unfolded without interruption. Work continued. Projects expanded. The exit planning initiative grew quietly through referrals rather than announcements. Legal clinics staffed discreetly. Advisors rotated anonymously. Impact measured internally, not advertised. Caleb's professional standing continued to shift. Appearances shortened. Roles adjusted. Invitations retracted. Influence eroded without confrontation. The absence of access did the work. A public indicator surfaced unexpectedly through a trade publication announcing leadership restructuring at a firm once closely associated with Caleb. The article framed it as strategic realignment. Names moved lower in the list. Titles softened. No explanation followed. The information registered without reaction. Marjorie's presence faded almost completely. No direct communication. No indirect probes. The social circle recalibrated around new centers of gravity. Influence doesn't linger where it can't be exercised. At home, routine stabilized. Mornings opened without interruption. Decisions moved without commentary. Space no longer felt provisional. The first unexpected piece arrived during an ordinary afternoon. No calls, no emails, no pending approvals, just quiet continuity. That quiet lasted 3 months. Then came the court filing. The petition was filed quietly, not locally, but in a jurisdiction selected for procedural advantage. The claim focused narrowly on temporary conservatorship review, avoiding language that would trigger immediate dismissal. The filing named concern for asset preservation during emotional recovery. The move escalated everything. Service was delivered formally. No warning. No courtesy call. The intention was clear: force engagement under pressure, create public record, regain leverage. Elliot responded within hours. Emergency motion to dismiss filed. Evidence attached. Medical evaluations. Financial audits. Prior correspondence documenting attempted interference. A request for sanctions included. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing within 10 days. Preparation moved fast. Independent neurologist evaluation completed within 48 hours. Cognitive testing thorough and documented. Results unambiguous. Financial auditors compiled a comprehensive timeline demonstrating consistency, oversight, and independent decision-making since before the marriage began. Witness statements gathered from advisors, compliance officers, and trustees. Everything aligned. The hearing took place in a small, quiet courtroom. No media. No audience beyond required parties. Caleb attended. Marjorie did not. Arguments presented calmly. Concern emphasized by petitioning counsel. Evidence dismantled implication point by point. The judge asked direct questions. Answers came without hesitation. The petition was dismissed on the record. Findings noted lack of cause and expressed concern over repeated attempts to challenge autonomy without substantiation. A warning followed. Further filings without new evidence would invite sanctions. The case ended there. No appeal followed. Afterward, Caleb attempted contact once more. A message acknowledging the ruling. A request for closure. The message went unanswered. The aftermath unfolded predictably. Advisors distanced themselves. Boards adjusted. Social access narrowed. Attempts to reframe the narrative failed without institutional support. What remained was distance. The legacy moved forward intact. Quietly, purposefully, the exit planning initiative expanded into 5 regions. Partnerships formed with independent clinics. Funding distributed through blind trusts. No names attached. The work stayed invisible by design. One final message arrived months later from a former mutual acquaintance. An apology for not seeing it sooner. No response was required. Life continued. There were no speeches, no public declarations, no final confrontation. Control dissolved because it could no longer reach. The story didn't end loudly. It stabilized, and stability proved stronger than any attempt to reclaim what was never owned. The dismissal should have ended everything. Legally it did. Practically it shifted tactics again. The next phase didn't arrive through courts or institutions. It arrived through proximity. A familiar face appeared in the Harbor Line lobby one afternoon. Not Caleb. Not Marjorie. A woman named Claire Donnelly, someone known through overlapping social circles. Someone who had never required explanation before. Friendly. Approachable. Disarming by design. The encounter looked accidental. It wasn't. Claire waited near the concierge desk, phone in hand, eyes lifting just as I crossed the marble floor. Surprise registered perfectly on her face. A laugh followed, a comment about timing, an offer for coffee made casually, as if this were coincidence and not calculation. Declined politely. Claire didn't push. Pressure never arrives immediately when the goal is access. Pressure waits. 2 days later, a delivery arrived at the condo. Flowers. No note. The arrangement matched preferences, never shared publicly. That detail mattered. The flowers were returned unopened. The next attempt came through a different channel. A calendar invitation sent to a private email address I hadn't used in years. Subject line neutral. Conversation. No sender name visible. The invitation was deleted without opening. Patterns repeated. Soft entry. Gentle persistence. Escalation avoided openly. Then came reputation work. A whisper campaign surfaced quietly. Nothing defamatory. Nothing actionable. Just enough suggestion to make people pause. Concern framed as care. Isolation framed as instability. Distance reframed as distress. The narrative wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It only needed to exist long enough to slow momentum. The response wasn't reactionary. It was procedural. Elliot activated a containment protocol designed years earlier for entirely different reasons. Communication logs preserved. Contact attempts documented. Third-party intermediaries identified. Patterns mapped. At the same time, Sofia Ramirez initiated an independent review of recent rumor vectors. Nothing dramatic. Just verification. Results came back clean. The concern narrative had no institutional traction. No advisor had flagged instability. No compliance marker existed. The story stalled. That's when proximity turned into provocation. Claire appeared again, this time at a gallery opening in Coral Bay. The event wasn't on my calendar. Attendance wasn't planned. The coincidence was deliberate. This time, Claire approached directly. Voice soft. Smile concerned. A comment about worry and distance and how hard this must be. The words didn't matter. The test did. The response was brief. Polite. Closed. Claire didn't pursue conversation further. The message had already been delivered. Pressure would escalate elsewhere. It did. A former colleague reached out requesting a meeting to clear confusion. Another requested reassurance about stability. A third asked indirectly whether everything was okay. Each inquiry received the same response. All matters handled professionally, no further discussion. The volume of inquiries dropped quickly. Gossip thrives on reaction. Starve it and it moves on. Caleb's involvement resurfaced through business channels next. A proposal arrived from a consultancy tied loosely to one of his remaining partnerships. The pitch suggested collaboration on shared legacy initiatives. The proposal wasn't insulting. It was revealing. Declined. 2 weeks later, a donor event reissued an invitation with altered seating. The seat placed me beside a neutral party rather than prior arrangements. The message behind the change was subtle. Influence testing resumed. Attendance proceeded. Contribution proceeded. Seating correction followed the next morning without discussion. The message landed. Control cannot function without response. The following escalation was less subtle. A private investigator's inquiry reached Elliot's office, requesting confirmation of resident stability and daily routine consistency. The request didn't cite authority. It implied oversight. The response came sharply. Unauthorized inquiry. Notice issued. Documentation preserved. The inquiry ended. At this point, the pattern became undeniable. Every failed entry point resulted in a new attempt through a different layer. Social, legal adjacent, professional, personal. The objective remained constant, reopen access. The decision was made to end the cycle. Not through exposure, through finality. A formal cease and desist notice went out to 5 parties simultaneously. Names included intermediaries, consultants, and advisory firms tied indirectly to Marjorie's influence network. The language was restrained, but unmistakable. Further contact or inquiry would be treated as coordinated interference. The notice worked. Contact stopped entirely. Weeks passed without incident. That absence allowed something unexpected to happen, normalcy. Mornings stabilized into routine. Workdays flowed without interruption. Evenings ended without mental rehearsals of responses that might be required. The body adjusted faster than expected. Sleep deepened. Appetite returned to baseline. Distance stopped feeling defensive and started feeling natural. The exit planning initiative crossed an important threshold during that time. The first cohort completed transitions without public exposure. Legal independence restored. Financial controls reestablished. Support tapered as autonomy returned. That success mattered. Quiet effectiveness replaced vigilance. Then, unexpectedly, Caleb appeared again. Not directly. A business journal published a profile about a new chapter following challenging transitions. The article framed resilience, reinvention, lessons learned. My name wasn't mentioned. The implication didn't need to be. The article wasn't hostile. It wasn't apologetic. It was an attempt to reset narrative footing. It didn't work. Without access, narrative lacks weight. The article faded within days. Shortly after, Marjorie attempted contact for the last time. A letter arrived by courier. Handwritten. Formal. Controlled. The content referenced family, tradition, misunderstanding. No mention of money. No mention of control. Only reconciliation language. The letter was read fully. No response followed. Silence answered better than words ever could. Time continued. The final confirmation of closure arrived indirectly through Oliver Grant during a quarterly review. A brief note. No further external pressure detected. That was it. No explosion. No apology. No reconciliation. Just conclusion. Space reopened internally where vigilance once lived. Decisions expanded beyond defense. Long-term planning resumed. A property acquisition completed quietly in a different city. Not for retreat. For optionality. Identity shifted subtly. Not louder. Clearer. The role of quiet wife dissolved completely, not replaced by spectacle, but by ownership of presence. The legacy continued its trajectory without interference. Control never returned. And for the first time since the beginning, nothing waited around the corner. The absence that followed felt different from every silence before it. Not guarded. Not tense. Simply empty of interference. Days passed without unexpected messages, without redirected invitations, without someone attempting to step into space that no longer belonged to them. That was when rebuilding actually began. Morning routines stopped revolving around anticipation. No scanning emails for hidden pressure. No rehearsing responses. No preparing for appearances. Harborline residences felt like a place to live instead of a place to perform. Curtains stayed open. Phones stayed face down. Time stopped being divided into defensible blocks. The trust work entered its final phase. Oliver Grant coordinated with international custodians to complete asset insulation across jurisdictions. Redundancy layered into every structure. No single advisor held influence. No single institution carried risk. Authority stayed centralized and accountable. Documentation was finalized. Living directives updated. Powers clearly assigned with strict limitations. Emergency protocols defined narrowly. No ambiguity remained. Every door either locked or deliberately open. The legacy stopped feeling abstract once control was fully reclaimed. Not as a number, but as responsibility. Stewardship replaced secrecy. Purpose replaced vigilance. That shift influenced the work ahead. The exit planning initiative expanded formally, though never publicly. Advisory partnerships formed with independent legal clinics in coastal cities where financial dependency cases had risen quietly over the last decade. Support packages were built to function without public credit. No names. No donor recognition. Only outcome tracking. Cases came steadily. Not dramatic. Not headline-worthy. Quiet situations where control wore softer faces. Shared accounts frozen without explanation. Spouses excluded from meetings for simplicity. Dependents reframed as care. Each case followed the same structure. Stabilize. Separate. Educate. Restore autonomy. Exit cleanly. Watching that process succeed confirms something important. Control relies on confusion. Once clarity arrives, control weakens quickly. Life outside the work softened too. Relationships reorganized naturally. People who required performance faded out. People who never asked for explanation remained. Nina Carter continued morning walks along the marina without commentary. Paula Jensen left bread on Sundays without questions. Conversations stopped orbiting around what happened and started existing where things were going. The condo changed slowly. Personal art replaced stage decor. A desk moved closer to the window. A bookshelf filled with books chosen without intention of display. Space became private in the truest sense. One afternoon, an envelope appeared beneath the door. No courier, no return address. Handwriting familiar but restrained. Caleb's name appeared inside. The letter was brief. No accusations. No defenses. Acknowledgement without ownership. A statement about regret framed around loss of connection rather than harm caused. A suggestion that time changes perspective. The letter was read once, then filed, not discarded, not returned, stored. Some things don't require response to be resolved. Weeks passed, then months. The first anniversary of the separation arrived without recognition. No dates circled, no reflection rituals. Just another day lived fully on its own terms. That day ended with an unexpected call from Elliot Monroe. Not urgent, not procedural, just confirmation that all outstanding monitoring had returned to baseline. No residual inquiries, no external interest. The system was quiet. Shortly after, an opportunity emerged organically. A private foundation reached out through Oliver Grant seeking strategic guidance on restructuring governance after internal conflict involving donor influence. The irony wasn't lost. The consultation was accepted under one condition: independence preserved, no visibility required. That work extended the same principles. Clear authority, transparent limits, no ambiguity disguised as tradition. Results followed quickly. The foundation stabilized. Leadership recalibrated. Donor influence returned to appropriate boundaries. Quiet resolution achieved. Control corrected itself once rules were enforced. The work continued steadily. Caleb's presence faded entirely from daily awareness. No updates surfaced. No indirect signals appeared. The narrative closed itself without confrontation. Marjorie's name surfaced once more through social channels months later. A gala chair reassignment. A board resignation. No context provided. Influence relocating elsewhere. That registered without emotion. Freedom doesn't announce itself loudly. Freedom shows up when nothing else does. The final internal shift came unexpectedly during a routine review of legacy documentation. While scanning early trust drafts written years before marriage, a note appeared in my mother's handwriting preserved digitally. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is leverage when chosen freely. The line settled differently now, not as strategy, as truth. The legacy had never been about concealment. It had been about timing. Timing allowed observation without distortion. Timing allowed patterns to reveal themselves fully. Timing made decisions irreversible. That understanding closed the loop. A quiet decision followed. A long-term residence was secured outside Bayshore Heights. Not as an escape, as expansion. A place where no history demanded performance. A place chosen deliberately, not inherited socially. The move was gradual. No announcement. No farewell tour. Just boxes leaving quietly. Keys returned. Harborline Residences thanked for its chapter. On the final morning there, sunlight filled the empty living room. No furniture left. No staged impressions. Just space. The door closed without pause. In the new city, routines rebuilt naturally. New walking paths. New cafes. No introductions required. Identity carried internally rather than announced. Work continued remotely. Initiatives expanded cautiously. Outcomes tracked. Adjustments made. Autonomy stabilized into something stronger than relief. Peace. Months later, a message arrived through a secure channel associated with the exit planning initiative. A woman successfully completed transition documentation and wrote a single line. I didn't think quiet strength was real until I lived it. That mattered. The legacy continued to function as intended, supporting, shielding, empowering without spectacle. No one attempted access again. Control never returned because control had nowhere left to attach. The story didn't conclude with apology or reconciliation. It concluded with alignment. Life moved forward unburdened by explanation. And that was enough. If this story resonated, take a moment to support the channel by subscribing and leaving a comment about where this story is being heard from. Quiet stories like this only travel when people stay, listen, and share them.